There's some fine details, and if you pay attention to, you can get the bot working just a smidge better. So if you're using these in competition, particularly with other similar bots, you know, that work is worth doing. So I'm checking both axes to make sure I'm going in straight. I want to straighten it as early in the threading process as I can. It'll be straight by the time it goes to the bottom, but if I can be putting it in straight, there'll be less stress in the threads. So I've gone all the way tight, and then I'll get off just a smidge. So that's what it should look like. You can see it. There's not a lot of angle available, but it's fully floppy and pivoty and slidey. So that's how you want these to be. They were also still good and tight, so I feel like they won't back themselves out. If you have managed to get them loose enough that they feel like they'll back out, you can put a smidge of super glue into the bottoms and then make sure that you, wipe it carefully and keep it smooth on the bottom. But that feels good. Next, we'll go ahead and mount this to the frame, to the shoulder. And again, we'll drop these in here. And the shoulder's tall enough that it holds it really good and square. You struggle to get this out of square. And I'm gonna just ease up on, go ahead and bind it a smidge and back it off just enough so it should pivot really, really freely. Last one. Down to, no, that feels pretty good. So it all moves really nicely and freely. And that's what you want, is there's no slop. You can't, I'm trying to bend it that way and make sure that that's clear. Yeah, not able to get any real angle on it, but it moves nice. So next we can install the shoulder to the bot. So it goes in with aluminum rod. So you want the aluminum rod should pivot, should slide nicely there and pivot freely. You don't want binding there. We do want it pretty snug on here. So actually that's too easy. So when it slides that easily, a lot of times what I'll do is just gently mash one end, just a smidge. That should be enough to really lock it in place when it gets all the way down there. ideally I only have to put this in once. So I'm going to put that in there to lock all that in place. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and do the zip ties for the motors. It's just that much easier to do before putting the shoulder on. So earlier I was saying how I like to use the tail of the zip tie to hold the wires in place. So I'm going to do that by making sure it goes in there and it holds it down. So stick the zip tie in there, come back up, feed it through. And I'll be snugging that zip tie all the way, but I'll leave it long, not that long, but kind of long to help. I'm going to get that really good and tight because I want it to help hold all that in place. You could just tuck it there, but if it gets pulled out, you wouldn't want it long enough to really snag anything. So I'm going to trim it back there so that if anything got wonky, it wouldn't be enough to really snag in the arms. The other thing about Squeezy that I have to admit often I forget until the very, very end is the zip tie rear spring tails. So with all these bots, you want enough ground pressure to win the ground game. So the wheels will be here, but with two-wheel drive, I don't want to push down too far so that I pick the wheels up. So with two-wheel drive and the weight pretty far back, which you want the weight back to be able to lift a bot out in front. What we found was the best was we actually used these as springs to just keep the nose on the ground without unweighting the wheels too much. So these will be here, and then the tails will function as springs, just like we do in the claws. So I always like to make sure I know where I'm going to have the head. So it's going to be there. Don't worry, it's BattleBot, made to take impacts. Head will be there. So I can feed the zip tie through there, tuck it back to come out the bottom. And it will so you want these tight enough so they get bumped around, they don't move. We don't want to fail that zip tie. What we will do, you can leave them long for the moment, but what we'll do at the end is snip them to a reasonable length, and that will be just enough spring to keep the nose on the ground. So same thing here. I want it paced that way, so I'm going to go in like that. And you might, these would have gone through just fine, but you might have to flex that, crease it a bit to make sure that it's easy enough to push through there. So there's our springtails. It's probably the first time I've remembered to put them in before buttoning it all up in quite a while. So the top armor on Squeezy actually can go on now. A lot of times you leave the top armor till last, particularly if you're getting those zip ties on. We did that one. We hadn't done that one yet. We'll go ahead and do that one next. This one's a lot less important, but we'll still orient it the same way. Orientation's less important. Zip tie itself is good backup, but we're not worried about using the tail of this zip tie. Trim this one flush so it's not sharp. You should always have safety glasses on when you snip things. Alright, so we're approaching done. We'll go ahead. The shoulder is ready to mount. It's not actually super critical when we do the Strymag, but it's probably easier to do now. So generally, there's a lot of slots available so that it can work with a lot of different servos. We do generally want it kind of as high as we can get it. So that one should be right there. All right, so I'm putting that crossbar between the top two. Is that gonna fit? Just barely. So maybe we'll go down one notch. If we go to there, yeah, we're still hitting 2. So the link will slide on this side over here, and we want to make sure that it doesn't interfere with the highest nut that goes, or highest screw that goes through there. So the top screw will go through from this side. The next further down screw can go through from the opposite side. With many of these things, there's a good chance that you'll want to clearance the servo horns. So this is just a standard 1/16. We do send this with like larger class kits. If people are going to be doing a bunch, we'll provide some extra tools like some of the drill bits. This time we're going to put this through the top 3, and that's all it takes is just run it with your fingers. It helps make sure that the other screws will go through nice and easily. Do like to watch it go through to make sure that it doesn't actually hit a hole, and it doesn't just break the Strymag open. There's the first one. And the second one, even when this is fully back and the link is pulling here, it won't reach down to the bottom one. This one can go through on the opposite side. Can't put them both on the same side because the heads will interfere. And some servo horns are long enough that the horn itself will go all the way to the top, including filling the top hole. This particular one did not, but there's extra. So what I'm going to do is drill that first to make my life easier. And this will capture the top screw that goes through there. Actually, let's make sure we needed to do that. Didn't just make that too big. Yeah, that would be great. So now, wearing safety glasses, of course. Snip that. This can actually go in there, and what we're doing is just backing up the screw that's going to go through the link into the Strymec. That's the only 1.3 millimeter screw left, and we just have not found a place that makes this size screw with a 1.5 hex driver like we want it to. Get it down way far enough. We'll have to see about offering some longer horns to go with our Starbot servos, so we don't have to do this yet. Go. Much better. All right. Skipped another step. It is defined in the instructions. Fortunately, we have good clearance between the link and the slider. So we want that to move nice and freely. And unfortunately, it does. So we can go ahead and put in the aluminum rod, mashed end last. tightened up nicely with the mashed end hit. It's very hard to actually try and push back out. So the aluminum rod is well retained in the chassis, and this mechanism rotates nice and freely. We do have a way to set the down stop so that the claws don't go too far down, and that goes right there. Another aluminum screw, because we are quite tight on weight. And we'll put this in right now, but we won't have to won't run it all the way down. It usually needs just a smidge, and a lot of this depends on how your tires are worn, how you set your front plow, and how you set your springtails. So almost to the last step, which is the black aluminum screw. We'll go through here. We do want it to pivot freely, so check your clearance there. We do want it to tighten up in the slider, as it is, so that's good. The black screw is slightly shorter than the silver screws, so that it does not require a washer. Should be able to snug that, and it'll still pivot quite freely. So that is looking pretty darn good. I never mind testing it a few times while we're building. That looks perfect, actually. We don't have rubber bands in yet. We'll do that next. So the amount of rubber banding down that we do with will be more grip strength before lift. So I like to go ahead and load them up. We'll start off with 3. See how they do. These are new rubber bands that actually are able to spec their size quite specifically. Both their unstretched length and their stretched length. So interested to see how they do in the long run. If you've gotten some of these new material ones, have some feedback, let us know. So, any paperclip hook tool. I find it easiest to do the always passing the hook through the chassis, and then getting it hooked on there. So now it grabs. So now it should always grab before it lifts. So it does that full motion before the shoulder really pivots. So that'll let you grab a bot and lift it up. Looks great. Let's button her up. 25 minutes. do often super glue the switch in place, but I found recently the amount of servo wire under it tends to have it finish out there pretty well. I don't know, I don't want it to be above level though. So I will go ahead and put a smidge of super glue in there. Yep. So what we'll do, use the same stuff again. This time we're not going to spray the activator until after. So we'll go ahead and get some glue on that face and on this face. Because I will be using activator. I'm going to go ahead and close that all the way back up so we can't contaminate it. What I'm trying to do here is get this, I like the switch to be flush with the chassis so that the top armor is actually above it. So the super glue might have been enough on its own, but with the spritz of that, then I know the super glue cured. And now my switch is quite well held in place. Below the level of the deck. Pretty good about all that. Go ahead and put the top armor on. Probably start by just securing it with 2 of them until we've played with it some. There's one side. And the far side. We're at 28 minutes from start to finish so far. Well, not finish, but 28 minutes worth of assembly. So these plows, we wanted to be able to have a good ground game and make it everything printable and replaceable. So if that front edge gets chewed up in competition, it's easy to replace. And kind of fun to try different colors on this piece. You can add a smidge of acetate. It's got a nice flat spot for that in case that's something you want to do. Making sure I can feel that it's not pushing the plow away from the chassis. I tighten these up. So I'm got my fingers under there so I can feel that it's going the right way. There we go. What's left is the wheels, and snipping the spring ties in the back. So Squeezy, you may have noticed, has these tapered wheels. Squeezy often gets down just within its last possible gram. So the tapered wheels can work in conjunction with trimming about a third of the tire away. And you want to take it over so that you want to go past that notch in the middle. So you'll be taking a little over a quarter. It'll still let it bind in the notch real well. But often it's good to go ahead and assemble and see how you are on weight. Some bots fully make it no problem. So remember, these are a D flat. So I've set my D flat up. The wheels are intentionally quite hard to push on because they need to be retained really well. In competition, a lot of times we will put a dot of super glue on the end, put the wheels on, and then spray activator into the end. But we've been working quite hard on getting our wheels to retain well, and I think we've got it. We actually use a mandrel, but you want to squeeze. You don't want to just jam this wheel onto the chassis because you'll be putting a lot of pressure on the motor mount. When you do this, you want to kind of pinch, holding the motor itself. And like I said, it should be hard to go on because you don't want it to come off. There we go. And there should be visible clearance all the way around and should get all the way to flush. So same thing on the other side. Set my D flat up. Check my D flat and my wheel. And I'm gonna hold on to the motor itself and squeeze